To understand politics, you must first understand the state of mankind, the very nature of man himself. The question, what is man, what is his nature, and what is his purpose, has traditionally been answered as, man is a fallen angel, whose nature has been corrupted through some way, through some sin, through the creation of self-awareness. In the Christian worldview, man was free of sin and lived in the Garden of Eden, but through the original sin he was cast out of this utopia and forced into the world, and man became self-aware. Now, mankind is cursed with sin, or better yet, stained with it. And the only way for redemption for mankind is to wait, follow the teachings of the Church, and wait for the destruction of this sinful world in which those who have been faithful will be saved and reunited in heaven. And historically, this has always led to a divine leader in the form of a divine king, or divine leader such as the Pope in the Catholic world. While not always true, the state and the king should always be subject to the whim of the Church. But in Europe, when this relationship broke down and we entered the Enlightenment period, where people were not only questioning the Church, but were questioning the leaders themselves, we see a new age of this fallen angel theory in politics. Thus we see the creation of the egalitarian leftist, or perhaps more accurately, the school of progressivism as we know it today. And the founder of this school of thought, in my opinion, would be Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And I'd like to read a little bit about why I think this is, from his writings, and how they've influenced the modern egalitarian movement. Rousseau, in his work Discourse on the Origin and Basis of Inequality Among Men, asserts that the natural man is free and happy and living in the forest, and that only through the invention of society, man ends up dominated by inequality, dependency, violence, and unhappiness. In the state of nature, Rousseau believes, we are free to do whatever we want, but our desires and impulses are not tempered by reason. We have physical freedom, but we lack morality and rationality. He examines man's physical and mental characteristics and finds him to be an animal like any other, motivated by two key principles, pity and self-preservation. The only real attribute that separates him from the animals is his perfectibility, or his nature as a fallen angel. Man in the state of nature has few needs, no idea of good and evil, and little contact with other humans. This, however, is complete nonsense, yet Rousseau's writing formed the basis of many utopian idealists, and in particular, the French socialist, which in turn leads to the Marxist. To summarize this, the following quote. The invention of property and the division of labor represent the beginning of moral inequality. Property allows for the domination and exploitation of the poor by the rich. Initially, however, relations between rich and poor are dangerous and unstable, leading to a violent state of war. As an attempt to escape from this war, the rich trick the poor into creating a political society. The poor believes that this creation will secure their freedom and safety, but in fact it merely fixes the relations of domination that existed before, creating laws to establish inequality. Inequality now more or less unrelated to man's original nature. Physical inequality is replaced by moral inequality. Rousseau's account of the operation of society focuses on its various stages. Beginning with the trick played by the rich, he sees society as becoming more and more unequal, until its last stage, which is despotism, or the unjust rule of everyone by one man. This development is not inevitable, but it is extremely likely. As wealth becomes the standard by which men are compared, conflict and despotism become possible. For Rousseau, the worst kind of modern society is that in which money is the only measure of value. This I would agree with. Rousseau's conclusions to the discourse are clear. Inequality is natural only when it relates to physical differences between men. This I disagree with. In modern societies, however, inequality derives from a process of human evolution that has corrupted man's nature and subjected him to laws and property, both of which support a new, unjustifiable kind of inequality, termed moral inequality. This is an unacceptable situation, according to Rousseau, but he gives few clues about how it can be improved. Now, this is also called political inequality. Moral inequality is based upon unnatural foundations. It is created not by nature, but by a convention or agreement between consenting men. Differences in wealth, power, status, or class are moral inequalities. They involve one person benefiting at the expense of another. Whilst many authors have confused it with the natural state of affairs, Rousseau insists that this type of inequality is a recent creation. So what then is the solution to Rousseau's claim of society corrupting man? Here we now introduce the solution of Marxism and many other such egalitarian political structures. Since society is bad, we must have a socialist revolution. In essence, this is an attempt to eliminate the sins, as it was known, of hatred, exclusiveness, pride, self-interest, and so on. The end goal of the progressives, or leftists in general, is the creation of a utopia. But in this utopia, the state shall engineer the transformation of society into a social dynamic of purely abstract human beings, where biological sins, this is to say things like gender, ethnicity, and class differences, are eliminated. It completely removes the human element from the world, from this realm of politics. Now, Rousseau's theory on the state of man is in contrast to, reality, but it's also in contrast to the Hobbesian theory, in which man is brutal and violent, and his life is very short, until the creation of the society and the state. By all measures of my understanding of history and the creation of man and the evolutionary strategies that we employ as human beings, Hobbes' theory is closer to the truth than Rousseau's. And Rousseau's theories on the state of mankind has led to the creation of these mass murder machines, these body-piling communist dictatorships or totalitarian states that are attempting to remove the sin of inequality from amongst the population. By now we know where this progressivism leads to. It leads to endless, unending death and the destruction of a people. And the reason is they are trying to perfect man. You could see this in the idea of the new socialist man proposed by the USSR, I believe. But in their quest to create this perfect man, they strip man of his humanity, of his nature, and attempt to reform him from the ground up. And it does not work, because humans do not operate that way. We operate off of the fact that inequality is an absolute within nature itself. And so when someone like myself tries to find what the best possible political system is, I cannot operate from the idea that man is a fallen angel. Instead, I operate from a different premise. And this stems from the foundational idea that man is not a fallen angel. Man is a natural animal whose roots lie in nature itself, and that we are part of this complex nature that surrounds us. But now where do we go for politics? Once we understand that man is an animal and is a part of the natural world, where do we take our politics? Well, let's look to some of the greatest thinkers that also understood this idea, even so long ago. And the first one would be Aristotle. And essentially what Aristotle says is that man is a social animal. Anyone so independent as to need no society is either a beast or a god. From this, Hobbes and Voltaire explain that society and governance through a central authority exists to try and control the animalistic nature of man. Now this means, in contrast to the fallen angel theory, that the earth and society are good things, that society is not bad, the earth isn't bad. This is in complete contrast to the progressive view of society's inequalities or the Christian worldview of a sinful earth. Now, Nietzsche says that humanity is a tortured being trapped between God and beast, and that humanity will evolve its way into godhood, and this is built on the principle of Darwin's evolutionary theory. Now, for the sake of brevity, and to summarize what the reaction to all of this thinking is, when we form a state and when we look at society, we wish only to copy the conditions that allowed humanity to rise above animals in the first place. That is the entire principle in which we derive our political viewpoints from and our social theory from. We wish to embrace nature's inequality in order to progress further. This is actual progress as far as I am concerned. We understand that different people have different needs, but that not all needs are equal. We understand that we must encourage only the best and brightest of humanity to succeed in passing on their genes, and that the weak must be led by the strong. We want to bring back strength and honor as a virtue, not only in our societies, but in our governance as well. This is a reaction to the soul-crushing industrial governance that we have been experiencing for the past 100, 120, 150 years. We wish to implement a system that will work with humanity, with human nature, with the state of mankind, rather than against it. Because if you work against it, you end up with things like communism, Now, many detractors will say that by viewing man as just a natural animalistic creature, that this somehow leads to endless war and conflict and ethnic cleansing and eugenics and things like this, but this is not true. Because humans possess rationality and empathy to one another, while we wish to encourage the natural forces of inequality, that does not mean that we must crush the weak underneath the butt of a rifle or anything like that. In fact, we wish to raise up the lowest amongst us to a higher realm of existence. This goes back to the idea of man evolving into godhood itself. This comes from a deep love of our people and of ourselves and the desire for success. And I believe, again, if we work with nature, we can form a system of governance that will last the test of time, that our societies will not fall into ruin as they have today. My time is up. Thank you very much for listening.